He thought he was just dropping his daughter off at school, until a woman with tired eyes and a secret past opened the door. What happened next changed everything, not just for him, but for the broken little family he never meant to find. If stories like this move you, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because sometimes all it takes is one moment to start again. Ashfield Hollow in the rain. The rain started halfway through the drive, thin, slanted, like it wasn't sure if it wanted to fall or not. Ethan Brooks adjusted the windshield wipers, squinting through the fog clinging to the edges of his vision. The GPS recalculated again for the third time, and his daughter's voice piped up softly from the back seat. "Daddy, I don't think this is the right way." Neither did he. But Ethan didn't say that. He just offered a quiet, "We're almost there," and kept driving down the narrow tree-lined road where golden leaves floated down like pieces of memory. He hadn't meant to come this far. Ashfield Hollow wasn't on any of his maps. Not the digital ones, and certainly not the one in his mind that still tried to plan things even after everything. The school he'd been looking for, Ellendale Prep, was supposed to be 10 miles back, a pristine private campus with crisp uniforms and metal fences. Instead, what rose ahead through the mist was a one-story building with peeling white paint, a crooked porch, and a hand-painted wooden sign that read, "Little Pines Early Center." "This can't be it," Ethan muttered. But Ellie was already leaning against the window, her forehead pressed to the glass. "It smells like cinnamon," she whispered. Ethan parked anyway. A woman stood near the front steps, sweeping leaves into a pile too big for one morning. Her coat was damp at the shoulders, and tendrils of dark hair had slipped from her braid. She looked up as Ethan approached with Ellie's small hand tucked into his. She didn't smile right away, just met his eyes, steady, like she could sense he didn't want to be here. "Looks like the weather had its own plans," she said. Her voice was soft, but not fragile. "Yeah, sorry. I think we're at the wrong school." She looked down at Ellie, whose coat zipper was half stuck and whose wide brown eyes were darting from the leaves to the woman's face. "There's no such thing as a wrong school on a rainy day," the woman replied gently. "You're welcome to stay, even just for today." Ethan hesitated. He should say no. He should get back in the truck, find the right school, or maybe just turn around and drive home. But home was an empty rental with unpacked boxes and cold air leaking through the windows. Ellie tugged his sleeve. "Can I try this one?" It wasn't the words that swayed him. It was her voice, timid, uncertain, like she was asking permission to hope. He nodded. Inside, the building smelled like vanilla and old pine. Warm light spilled from antique lamps. The classroom walls were lined with children's drawings and low bookshelves. There were tiny chairs and mismatched rugs, a piano in the corner that hadn't been tuned in years. The woman knelt to Ellie's level. "My name's Claire," she said. "What's yours?" "Ellie." "That's a beautiful name. Would you like to help me finish the morning muffins? They're blueberry." Ellie glanced at Ethan. He nodded again, this time slower. She let go of his hand, and just like that, she was gone, her small figure disappearing into a world Ethan hadn't built and couldn't control. Claire looked up at him. "You're welcome to wait," she offered. He shook his head. "I've got errands." She didn't press. Ethan stepped back toward the door, then paused. He looked at the room. Really looked. The soft hum of children's chatter, the smell of something warm rising from the kitchen. Claire's sleeves were dusted in flour. Ellie was already seated at a table, watching another little girl draw a crooked sun. Something pulled in his chest. A sharp, silent twist. Outside, the rain had picked up. It tapped against the windshield in steady rhythm. Ethan climbed into the truck and sat with the engine off, hands wrapped around the wheel but not turning the key. He should feel relieved. He'd found somewhere safe to leave Ellie for a few hours, but instead he felt displaced, unsettled. He glanced back toward the school. Through the glass, he could just make out Claire lifting a tray from the oven, Ellie standing on tiptoe beside her. He hadn't seen her smile like that in months. Claire watched him through the side window as she set the muffins on the cooling rack. The man hadn't driven off yet. She could see his silhouette through the fogged-up windshield, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, like someone holding something heavy he didn't trust the world to see. She knew that posture. She had worn it herself. She didn't know his name. But she knew grief when it passed through a door. Ethan finally turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, breaking the spell. He pulled out slowly, the tires crackling over wet gravel. He didn't glance back, but in the mirror he caught one last glimpse of the building, its crooked porch, its worn wood, and a tiny shape in the window. Ellie. Watching him leave. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. But something in her eyes made Ethan's hands tighten on the wheel. He'd come back. He didn't know it yet. But he would. And when he did, it wouldn't be just for Ellie. Ethan didn't come back the next day. He made excuses. Work. Groceries. The leaky pipe in the bathroom that had waited a week to be fixed but suddenly demanded attention. The truth was simpler. He didn't trust himself. Not to care. Not to hope. Not to be pulled into someone else's life again only to lose it all. He'd rebuilt just enough of his world to walk through it without falling apart. And yet, that morning, as he rinsed out his coffee mug, the silence of the rental cabin felt thicker than usual. The sunlight through the dusty blinds felt colder. He thought of Ellie's hand slipping out of his, her gaze trailing him through the rain-streaked window. He left the mug in the sink and grabbed the truck keys. When he pulled into the gravel lot of Little Pines, the place looked unchanged, still modest, still quiet. But something in Ethan stirred at the sight of it, like a song from long ago, half remembered, floating up through static. He walked inside. Claire was helping a little boy wash paint off his hands at the sink. Her hair was tied up today, loose strands falling along her cheek. Her sweater sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and one knee of her jeans had a patch shaped like a star. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "Ellie's in the reading nook," she said without turning. "She's been asking if you were coming." Ethan looked past her. His daughter was curled up under a blanket with a stack of picture books and two other children. She looked peaceful, settled. He hadn't seen that look on her since before everything went wrong. "Thanks," he said quietly. Claire finally turned, drying her hands on a towel. "You don't need to explain." He didn't try to. It wasn't until later, after the children went home and the afternoon light stretched long across the pine floor, that Ethan noticed the change. Claire's daughter. He hadn't realized the small girl trailing Claire was hers until she coughed. A sharp rattling sound, and Claire crouched beside her, placing a hand on the child's forehead with a mother's instinctive worry. "Sorry," Claire said. "She's just getting over something." "You don't have to apologize," Ethan said. He hadn't meant it to come out so soft. The little girl looked up at him with wary eyes. She had her mother's dark hair, but a quieter kind of sadness. The kind that didn't come from childhood, but from leaving childhood too soon. "What's her name?" Ethan asked. "Lena," Claire replied. "She's 6. He hesitated. "No. Husband?" There was a pause, long enough that he regretted asking. "No," she said simply. "Not anymore." Ethan didn't press, and Claire didn't elaborate. But in that silence they understood something about each other that words would have only diluted. Both had known love that turned into loss, and both were still learning how to breathe through the ash. It was nearly dusk when Ethan offered to help bring in the folding chairs from the yard. The air had that edge of October, cool and clean, tinged with smoke from someone's chimney nearby. Claire handed him 2 chairs and gave a half smile. "You don't have to stay." "I know," he said, but he did. They sat for a moment on the porch steps, watching the light flicker between the trees. Lena was drawing on the concrete with chalk spirals, stars, and a lopsided heart. Ellie sat beside her, copying every shape. "She hasn't made friends since the move," Claire said softly. Ethan nodded. "Ellie, too?" The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that acknowledged pain without poking at it. That let it breathe. Claire rubbed her hands together. "We're staying in the classroom right now. It's not ideal, but it's warm. Ethan looked at her. You live here? She gave a small nod like she didn't want to admit it out loud. There's an old teacher's cottage behind the school, he said. It's empty, but the roof's still solid. I'm renting it for now. Claire blinked. You mean the Weller place? That's the one. She hesitated. I have a guest room, he added. If you and Lena need somewhere better than cots and floor mats. She looked down. Her fingers tightened. I'm not asking for anything, Ethan said quickly. I just thought maybe we could help each other. That's all. Claire exhaled, slowly, then nodded. Just once. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep, Lena in the guest room, Ellie on the couch with a storybook clutched to her chest, Ethan stood in the kitchen drying mugs. Claire sat across from him, silent, watching, the steam rise from her tea. This isn't what I expected, she said. What part? All of it. He managed a soft smile. Yeah, me neither. Claire traced the rim of her cup. You don't know us. Maybe not, he said. But I think I've known what it's like to need a place to land. She looked up at him. For a moment, neither of them looked away. Then she whispered, almost to herself, I don't know how to accept kindness anymore without being afraid. Ethan folded the towel in his hand. Me neither. Outside, the wind stirred the branches of the old pines. In the corner of the yard, a bare patch of soil waited beneath the porch light, where something once grew, or where something might grow again. Neither of them spoke of it, but both of them noticed. The cottage behind the school was nothing special. 2 bedrooms, a creaky porch, floorboards that groaned under bare feet, and a front door that stuck when it rained. But to Claire, it felt like a cathedral. She ran her fingers along the windowsill, wiping off a film of dust. There were dandelions growing stubbornly through the porch steps. The scent of cedar lingered in the walls. And when she turned back to look at Lena curled up in a real bed, sleeping for once without a cough, she felt something she hadn't in months. Not peace. Not yet. But the beginning of it. Ethan stood in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled and a frying pan in one hand, flipping pancakes like a man who'd done it more for others than for himself. He didn't say much, just handed Claire a plate, then one for Lena when she shuffled in, rubbing her eyes. Claire gave a quiet, thanks, still not used to being offered anything without a price. Ellie came in next, hair wild, feet socked, dragging, her stuffed raccoon. Morning, she mumbled. Ethan glanced over and smiled, the kind that flickered across his face and vanished before it stayed long enough to mean something. But Claire saw it. She saw how he watched Ellie gently, protectively, how his voice, even when tired, softened by a few degrees around her. And she wondered, what did he lose? Who was she? Later that day, after breakfast, they sat on the front porch while the girls played with chalk again. The light was dappled through the maple trees, leaves catching gold like coins. Ethan sanded the corner of an old wooden bench with slow rhythmic movements. Claire sat on the steps, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he'd made just right. 2 creams, no sugar. Where'd you learn to fix things? She asked. My dad, Ethan said. He was a carpenter, built houses until his back gave out. She nodded. I like watching people who work with their hands. There's something steady in it. Ethan paused, brushing off the dust. It's the only time I know exactly what I'm doing. She smiled faintly. You seem like you know what you're doing most of the time. I don't, he said, simply. And Claire liked that about him, that he never pretended to be more than he was. There was something rare in that. Quiet honesty. No performance, just a man trying. Midday, the girls brought out juice boxes and a crumpled paper labeled Cafe Sunshine in crayon. Claire played along, ordering a pine cone sandwich and a dirt cupcake. Ethan sat stiffly at first, but melted when Lena, still shy, handed him a pretend coffee. You're our first customer, she whispered. He took it with both hands, serious as a surgeon. It's perfect, Ellie beamed. The air was different that afternoon. Not just warm, but soft. weightless in places where the days before had been thick with survival. Claire caught herself watching Ethan, not in judgment, not in fear, but in quiet wonder. There was a steadiness to him she hadn't seen in years. He didn't fill the room with words. He didn't shrink from silence. He just stayed. She realized how rare that was. That night after dinner, the girls colored at the kitchen table while Ethan repaired a drawer that had come off its hinges. Claire stood by the window looking out at the last of the evening light. "I never thanked you," she said. "For this." Ethan didn't look up. "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to." He finished with the drawer, slid it back into place with a satisfying click, and joined her at the window. "Why'd you leave?" he asked softly. Claire hesitated. "My husband, he wasn't who I thought. By the time I realized how far it had gone, I had a child and a suitcase and nowhere to go." Ethan nodded once but didn't offer sympathy. That she appreciated. Most, pity was a cheap currency. Understanding was far more generous. "And you?" she asked. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said. "Car accident. I buried her the same week the board voted me out of the company I built. We lost the house. I moved here because I didn't want to be anyone anymore." Claire swallowed. "Do you still feel that way?" "Some days," he said. "But not this one." Later that night the girls were in bed. The house was quiet. Claire stood in the kitchen doorway, arms folded. "Do you ever think we meet the right people at the wrong time?" Ethan looked up from the table, where he was drawing lines on a scrap of paper, plans for fixing the loose porch rail. "Or maybe," he said slowly, "we meet them when we're finally able to see them for who they are." She didn't answer, but she didn't look away. Outside, in the patch of earth behind the porch, a single green shoot had broken through the soil. Just a fragile thing, barely noticeable in the dim light. But it was there. And Claire, before heading to bed, stepped out in the cool air, crouched beside it, and brushed away the fallen leaves like someone clearing space for hope. The mornings had started to settle into a rhythm. Eggs on the stove, soft footsteps across the wood floor, the laughter of children not yet burdened by the weight their mothers and fathers carried. But some silences held more than peace. Some silences hid things. Ethan had always known that. He stood in the yard with a hammer in hand, repairing the sagging railing along the porch. The wood splintered easily, old pine, never sealed properly. He drove in a nail, paused, then looked over his shoulder. Claire was sitting on the steps, a mug between her hands, watching the sky. The clouds had come in low, soft, and gray, like the kind that pressed down but didn't yet rain. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but her fingers gripped the mug too tightly. Ethan set down the hammer. "You don't have to talk," he said, "but you can." Claire didn't speak at first. She set the mug down on the step beside her, folded her arms. Then, "Do you know what it feels like to be afraid of falling asleep next to someone you used to love?" Ethan didn't answer. Not yet. Claire's voice shook, but she kept going. "To wake up one night and realize the man in your house isn't your husband anymore. He's someone else. And worse, he's watching you like he doesn't recognize you either." She didn't cry, not even close. But her face had gone still, like a mask she'd worn too long. "Lena saw more than she should have," Claire said. "Things a 6-year-old should never see. I told myself we were safe, that I could protect her if I stayed, that leaving would make it worse." She looked up at Ethan. But staying broke her trust. Leaving might have saved her heart. He sat down beside her, not too close. "I know that kind of lie," he said. "Telling yourself things are okay because the truth is too heavy." Claire looked at him, eyes rimmed with fatigue. "Did you lie to yourself too?" "Every day," Ethan replied. "After the accident, I told Ellie her mom went to sleep, that she'd wake up in heaven." A long pause. "I even said she might visit," he added quietly, like it was some kind of fairy tale. But Ellie just stared at me and said, "She's not coming back, is she?" Claire reached out without thinking, laid a hand over his for a moment. Not grasping, just resting. It was enough. Inside, the girls were playing dress-up with old scarves and costume jewelry. Ethan watched them through the window for a long time, two children building a world out of make-believe because the real one had already asked too much of them. "They're strong," Claire whispered. "They had to be," Ethan said. "We didn't give them much choice." That evening, the power flickered as the wind picked up outside. Leaves scratched against the windows. The air smelled of distant smoke, someone burning leaves, or maybe a firewood stove lit too early. Ethan lit candles. Claire heated soup on the gas stove. They didn't talk much, just moved around each other in a rhythm that felt known, comfortable in its quietness. Later, as the children slept, Claire found Ethan in the old sunroom, sanding the edges of a drawer he'd pulled from the hallway cabinet. "You never stop fixing things," she said softly. He smiled, not looking up. "It's something to do with my hands. Keeps my mind from going places it shouldn't." "Like where?" "Like the night she died. The meeting I missed. The last voicemail I didn't return." Claire didn't reply. She didn't need to. He finally met her eyes. "Do you ever think, maybe we weren't meant to be okay again?" She sat down opposite him. "Sometimes, but then Lena laughs, or I catch her humming again. And I think, maybe we weren't meant to be the same. Maybe we're meant to be something new." That silenced them both, not with discomfort, but with the weight of something true. Ethan set the drawer aside. "Do you want to see something?" Claire followed him to the back door where he flicked on the porch light. The tiny green shoot that had broken through the soil days ago had grown. Not much, just a few inches. But strong. Stubborn. "Maple," Ethan said. "I thought it died last spring. Guess not." Claire crossed her arms against the chill. "It's a good place for a tree." He nodded. "A promise tree. That's what Ellie calls it." Claire turned to him, something catching in her throat. "What do you think it's promising?" she asked. He looked at her then, really looked. "That even after everything burns down," he said, "something can still grow." It started with pancakes on a Wednesday, not a birthday, not a holiday. Just a morning when the sky looked clearer than usual and the wind stayed gentle in the trees. Ethan woke early, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. That was new. Claire walked into the kitchen, hair still damp from her shower, and blinked at the smell. "You made those?" Ethan shrugged. "Ellie asked for them. I didn't say no." Claire poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter. "They smell like Saturday mornings, from when I was still someone's wife." Didn't answer, but his hands slowed a beat. Then Lena walked in, still half asleep, dragging her worn stuffed fox behind her. Ellie trailed behind, already talking about the dream she'd had, something with flying turtles and a bakery in the sky. It wasn't a special day, but it was the kind you wanted to remember. Later that afternoon, Ethan found Claire sitting on the back porch, a laundry basket beside her, folding warm clothes fresh from the dryer. The sun hit her hair just so, and for a moment Ethan didn't see the shadows under her eyes. He saw something close to peace. "I was thinking," she said without looking up, "maybe we could repaint the kitchen." Ethan raised a brow. "We?" "Well, I can stir paint. You're the one who fixes things, remember?" He sat down on the porch steps. "Why the kitchen?" "Because it's the only room where everyone always ends up. Might as well make it feel like it belongs to someone." Ethan didn't say what he was thinking. It already does. That evening, they made dinner together. Roasted vegetables, leftover chicken, a small apple pie from the bakery down the road that Mrs. Klein, the shop owner, had insisted Claire take. Just because. The girls set the table, squabbling good-naturedly over napkin colors. Ellie made place cards from folded paper. She wrote Mom on one and paused, glancing at Claire, then turned it over and scribbled something else. "Miss Claire," she said shyly, placing it beside the fork. Claire's eyes shimmered, but she smiled. "I've never had a place card." Before. You do now, Ellie said. Across the table, Ethan caught the exchange. He didn't say a word, but inside, something shifted, something that felt like a door creaking open after too long shut. After dinner, they all sat by the fireplace. The radio played softly, an old folk station from across the county, fuzzy in places but charming in its imperfection. Claire read a book aloud. The girls sat curled up in blankets, heads nodding, fingers laced in each other's. Ethan listened, with his eyes closed. It had been a long time since he let his guard down that far, since he allowed stillness to be enough. And in that moment it was. When the girls finally went to bed, Claire stayed by the fire. Ethan came back into the room with 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one and sat down across from her. I keep expecting the other shoe to drop, she admitted. He nodded. Me too. But what if, she said slowly, it doesn't? Ethan looked into the fire. Then maybe this isn't temporary. Maybe it's just simple. She smiled. Simple sounds like a miracle. A pause, the crackle of wood, the wind brushing gently against the windows. Do you miss her? Claire asked. He didn't need to ask who. Every day, he said. But not the same way anymore. Not like, I'm chasing her ghost, Claire watched him. And now I just hope Ellie doesn't forget her, and I try not to forget myself. She nodded, folding her legs beneath her. I used to think Lena would never laugh again. Now she won't stop. Claire laughed, and Ethan found himself smiling without meaning to. Before they went to bed, Claire stood at the back door, looking out at the little tree in the yard. The leaves had started to unfurl, green against the night, defiantly alive. Ethan joined her hands in his pockets. She's growing, Claire whispered. So are we, he said, almost afraid to speak it aloud. Claire turned toward him, and in the soft light from the kitchen their eyes met. No promises, no declarations. Just the quiet truth of 2 people who had almost given up on warmth and found it again in each other's company. It was the kind of morning that felt like a sigh. Soft light spilled across the kitchen floor. The maple outside had turned, burning gold against the blue-gray sky. Claire hummed as she stirred oatmeal, Lena tracing hearts on the window fog with her finger. And then the phone rang. Not the cell. The old landline that hadn't rung since Ethan moved in. He picked it up, expecting a wrong number. This Ethan Brooks? The voice was low. Gravel slick. Male. Ethan's body tensed. Who's asking? A pause. Then, you've got a woman. Staying with you? Dark hair. Kid. Cute little thing. The line went dead. Claire froze when he told her. Her eyes lost focus, body rigid. Ethan watched as the color drained from her face, like someone turning to stone from the inside out. She whispered, his name, Richard. 1 word. That was all. Ethan didn't ask who Richard was. He didn't need to. Every instinct in him already knew. They sat at the kitchen table long after the girls had gone to school, the silence between them thick with panic and memory. Claire clasped her hands. Hard, like she was trying to keep them from shaking. I changed our names at first, thought I could stay ahead of him. I worked odd jobs, kept moving. You did what you had to. I should have told you. Ethan leaned forward. You told me enough, and you were trying to protect Lena. That's more than enough. Her eyes were wet now, but she refused to let tears fall. He finds people, Ethan. I've seen what he can do when he's angry. Ethan nodded. Then he won't get close. She looked at him. You don't understand. He doesn't let go of things. Ethan didn't flinch. Neither do I. That night, Ethan checked the locks twice. He closed the curtains, pulled the truck closer to the porch in case they needed to leave in a hurry. Every instinct sharpened, like muscle memory from a life he used to live, when power meant knowing how to defend, how to anticipate. But this wasn't a boardroom. This was a home. and he realized how badly he didn't want to lose it. The next day, it started. A truck parked too, long down the street. Same one, different times. A man with mirrored sunglasses and a ball cap buying coffee at the gas station but never drinking it. Footsteps on gravel outside the school fence at night. Subtle, deliberate. Ethan said nothing to the girls, but Claire knew. Every time she held Lena tighter, every time she triple-checked the back door, every time her hand brushed Ethan's and lingered there unspoken, she was bracing for the storm. So was he. On Friday, the sheriff came by. Sheriff Mathers, round belly, slow speech, but eyes that saw too much. He'd been in Ashfield Hollow for 40 years and missed nothing. He looked at Ethan after church over a styrofoam cup of weak coffee. Heard there was a stranger sniffing around the edge of Maple Street. Ethan didn't blink. I've got family staying with me. Temporary. Sheriff nodded. Temporary's a funny word. Means more when you want it to be permanent. Ethan said nothing. The sheriff sipped. Just so you know, we look out for each other around here. Don't take kindly to things that threaten our own. That stuck with Ethan the rest of the day. Our own. That night, Claire sat on the porch steps again, Lena asleep inside. Ethan joined her, handing her a cup of tea without asking. She held it in both hands like something sacred. I hate living like this, she said. You're not alone anymore. Claire looked at him in the dark. You know he might try to hurt you. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Then, with quiet conviction, if he does, it'll be the last thing he ever tries. She flinched. He softened. I don't want violence. I want peace. But I'm not going to let someone tear down what we've built. Not again. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Then she whispered, Why are you doing this for me? He didn't blink. Because someone should have. A long time ago. She set the cup down. Her hand found his in the dark. And for a long time they just sat there, two shadows holding on while the wind moved through the trees. In the yard, the promise tree rustled. It had grown more leaves that week. Stubborn, green, alive. And it didn't. No fear. Only the sun, only the soil that now finally called it home. The rain came in hard and sideways. It hadn't been forecasted. 1 minute the sky was pale and calm. The next it cracked open like a threat. The pines howled. The porch shuddered. The wind screamed through the trees like it had something to prove. Ethan stood at the window, jaw tight, watching the driveway. Every shadow looked wrong. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. Claire was upstairs with the girls, pretending this was just another autumn storm. But Ethan saw her shoulders, rigid, alert, ready to run again if she had to. He wasn't going to let her. The knock came just after 9. 3 short raps. Casual, confident. Ethan didn't reach for the bat by the door, not yet. He opened it with slow purpose. A man stood there, soaked from the rain but wearing a smirk that didn't match the weather. Cap pulled low. Leather jacket zipped, and eyes that didn't blink. You must be the new landlord. The man said. Ethan didn't answer. The man looked past him toward the warm light spilling from the hallway. That little girl yours? Still, Ethan said nothing. She's a cute one. So is her mama. Ethan stepped forward, just enough to block the, Phew, you need to leave, he said, calm, final. The man's smile cracked wider. Or what? Behind him, lightning split the sky. The wind surged. A tree branch crashed somewhere in the woods. Ethan's voice didn't rise. You'll find out. The man tilted his head. You know what your problem is? You think just because you've been hurt you get to play hero now. But I'm not afraid of broken men. Ethan stared at him. Then, softly, firmly, you should be. The man stepped forward. Ethan didn't. Behind him he heard Claire's voice from the stairs. Ethan, just that. One word. But he knew what it meant. He turned slightly, just enough to speak. Take the girls. Back room, lock the door. Her footsteps vanished down the hall. When Ethan turned back, the man was already moving. Aggressive, hands out, a flash of motion in the stormlight. Ethan didn't think. He moved with the precision of instinct, not anger. One step, one swing. The man's shoulder hit the doorframe, a stumble, a punch thrown wide. Then Ethan pushed him. Hard. The man crashed into the porch rail. Wood cracked. Ethan stepped over him, heart pounding, breath steady. I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you think you're owed. But you're not getting past me. The man snarled, half coughing. She's mine. No, Ethan said, his voice low and steel. She never was. And Lena sure as hell isn't. The man lunged again, desperate now. Ethan grabbed him by the jacket, slammed him back into the post. Rain fell in sheets. Thunder rolled above. The man sagged, groaning. Ethan leaned close. If you come near them again, you'll wish you hadn't. The man muttered something, but Ethan was already stepping back. Already done. Go, he said. And this time, the man obeyed. Inside, Claire was still in the hallway, arms wrapped around both girls, one on each side. She looked at him, wet, bruised, shaking, and didn't speak. Ethan closed the door, locked it, braced it, and then he sank to his knees. Ellie ran to him first, arms tight around his neck. Lena followed, quieter, but just as firm. Claire stood there for one heartbeat longer, watching this man she barely knew, but somehow trusted more than anyone before. Then she walked to him, kneeling. She wrapped her arms around all three, and they held each other, in the dark, in the storm, in the silence that finally felt safe. Later, after the girls had fallen asleep in a pile of blankets near the fire, Claire found Ethan sitting alone on the porch, a towel around his shoulders, a small cut above his eyebrow. You okay? She whispered. He nodded, but his voice cracked anyway. I used to think walking away was strength, that being alone meant I couldn't lose anything. Claire sat beside him, close. And now? He looked at her. I'd lose everything again, he said. If it meant keeping you safe. She reached for his hand. I'm not running anymore, she whispered. He gripped her fingers like a lifeline. Then neither am I. The storm began to break, slowly, gently. The sky behind it washed clean, and in the yard, the promise tree, battered but unbroken, stood tall in the wind, its roots holding firm in the ground they now called home. The fire started at dawn. The world was still gray when the smoke reached Ethan's nose. He was on the couch, half asleep, his arm numb under Ellie's weight. Claire was in the rocker by the window, head tilted, Lena's hair spread across her chest. Then, the scent. Not wood stove smoke. Sharper, electrical, dirty. He was on his feet before he realized it. The back porch. Flames licked up the siding, orange tongues crawling fast. Claire was up a second later, grabbing Lena. Ethan scooped Ellie into his arms. Go, he barked. Out the front, now. He didn't wait for argument. He grabbed a blanket off the chair, threw it over the stove, then tore through the hallway, slamming doors open, checking for heat behind them. The fire was spreading, too fast for the age of the wiring, too fierce for a natural cause. This wasn't accidental. This was revenge. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late to save the back half of the house. The flames had devoured the kitchen, the porch, the mudroom. The treehouse Ethan had started building for the girls collapsed with a groan, sparks flying into the pale morning. Claire stood on the edge of the driveway, a blanket around her shoulders, soot in her hair. Lena clung to her side, coughing. Ellie leaned into Ethan's chest, silent, eyes wide with something too big for her years. Sheriff Mathers stepped up beside him, face grim. We'll find him, he said. Ethan nodded, jaw clenched. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. Hours passed. Firemen moved in and out. A neighbor brought coffee. Another brought boots for the girls who had escaped barefoot. Ashfield Hollow moved like a single body, Quiet, efficient, deeply shaken but not surprised. They had seen storms before. They knew how to hold each other up afterward. Ethan stood at the edge of the property, arms crossed, watching the smoke drift upward like a prayer. Claire came to stand beside him. "It's gone," she said. He didn't look away. "Not everything." "My photos," she whispered. "Lena's drawings. Her favorite pajamas." Ethan swallowed. "I know." Claire touched his arm, fingers gentle but firm. "I don't care about the things," she said. "Not really." He turned to her. "I care that you came back for us, that you didn't run, that you stood there and said, 'Not this time.'" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. They stayed that night at the school. Claire's classroom became a makeshift home, again. Sleeping bags on the floor. Hot soup from Mrs. Klein. Ellie and Lena curled together, cheeks smudged, hair wild, but safe. Ethan stood by the window long after the girls had fallen asleep. Claire joined him. Neither spoke for a while. Then she said, "It feels like I brought this here." Ethan shook his head. "You didn't bring the fire." "No," she whispered. "But I brought the match." He turned toward her. "No. He lit the fire. You brought us the reason to fight it. That stopped her. That made her cry. Not loud. Not broken. Just slow, silent tears sliding down a face that had held too much for too long." He pulled her into his arms, and this time, she didn't hesitate. In the morning, the town gathered. Not just neighbors, people they barely knew. The woman who ran the hardware store. The teenage boy who mowed lawns. The retired mechanic who rarely spoke more than 5 words. They came with tools, with blankets, with nails and plywood and casseroles and quiet. Ethan watched them from the edge of the playground, his chest tightening. He had forgotten what community looked like, forgotten what it felt like to be surrounded by hands that didn't take, but gave. The sheriff returned that afternoon. "We found the car, burned out 2 counties over." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "He won't stop." "No," Mather said. "But we will." He handed Ethan a paper, a court filing, protective orders, witness statements, support. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Later, as the sun dipped low and the air turned soft again, Ethan stood in the blackened yard where his house had been. Claire came to his side holding 2 mugs of coffee. "I don't know if I can do this again," she said. "Start over?" "No," she said. "Let myself believe it won't burn down again." Ethan took the mug from her, held her gaze. "It might," he said honestly. "But if it does, we'll build something better, together." She leaned into him, head on his shoulder. And for the first time since the fire, the silence didn't feel like loss. It felt like the start of something worth saving. They didn't talk about rebuilding. They just started. The morning after the fire, Ethan found a stack of lumber leaning against the half-standing shed. No note. Just good wood, dry, neatly cut. By noon, the men from the church showed up with hammers and tool belts. By evening, someone had dropped off a generator and 4 new mattresses still wrapped in plastic. No one asked questions. No one made speeches. They simply showed up, because that's what Ashfield Hollow did. Ethan worked like a man with something to prove, not to others, but to himself. He ripped out scorched beams, sanded salvageable boards, traced plans on butcher paper with his sleeves rolled to the elbow. Claire worked too. Not with tools, but with the kind of presence that steadied everything. She brought coffee to the crew, checked scraped knuckles, kept Lena and Ellie entertained with sidewalk chalk and snacks from the school kitchen. The girls. Painted signs. New house coming soon. Caution, good people at work. One read simply, "Home round 2. That week the wind changed. The air grew sharper, scented with wood smoke and cinnamon from a town-wide potluck organized just because. The leaves finished their turn, then began to fall. Each morning the ground was more gold than green. Claire stood with Ethan one evening watching the sun slip below the ridge. The frame of the new house was halfway up. The roof would come next. "This is more than I thought we'd get," she said softly. "It's not a handout," Ethan replied. "I know. That's why it's harder." He glanced at her. "I've spent most of my life feeling like I had to earn everything," Claire continued. "Even love, especially love." Ethan set his hammer down. "You don't earn love," he said. "You let it find you. Then you choose it. Every day." She looked at him, then quietly. "And you're choosing this?" Ethan didn't blink. "I already did. The moment I didn't run." That night, Lena had a nightmare. Claire rushed in to find her shaking, eyes wide. Before she could even climb into the bed, Lena whispered, "Where's Mr. Ethan?" Ethan heard his name and stepped in from the hallway. "I'm here, sweetheart," he said, kneeling beside her. Lena grabbed his shirt and wouldn't let go. Claire stood frozen, watching as her daughter, who once hadn't trusted a single man to even look her way, wrapped both arms around this one and fell back to sleep. She mouthed a silent thank you in the dark. He just nodded. The next morning they planted the new tree. The old promise tree had scorched on one side, but somehow still lived. Ethan carefully dug it up, carried it like a treasure, and replanted it in the center of the new yard, where the light hit longest in the afternoon. Claire and the girls pressed soil around the roots. Ellie made a sign that read, "Still here." It stood like a flag in the soil, a statement, a vow. On the 7th day, the house stood. Not finished, not polished, but framed, roofed, with a door that opened and windows that let the light in. Inside, the space felt wide and bare, but not empty. Claire walked through the front room barefoot, Lena on her hip. "This feels like," Ethan finished her thought, "a beginning." She smiled. "And this time I'm not afraid of it." That night they lit candles on the porch railing. No celebration, no crowd, just them. A small dinner, a fire in the pit, the girls playing, in the leaves. Claire turned toward Ethan and said, "I don't know what will be, but I know this feels real." He reached across the table and took her hand. "It is." She leaned in close. "And real is enough for me." In the yard, the promise tree rustled softly in the wind. Its branches hadn't fully filled in, but its roots were strong. The house had walls now, painted in soft colors, nothing too bold. Claire said homes shouldn't shout, they should exhale. Ethan had agreed, even though he didn't really know what that meant until he stepped inside one quiet morning and felt it. The house breathed. There were still boxes on the floor. Tools leaned in corners. Dishes mismatched from donations and flea markets. But it didn't matter, because every inch of it belonged to them. On the first official morning in the new home, the sunlight poured through the kitchen window like it had been waiting its turn. The scent of toast filled the air. The girls sat at the table drawing, barefoot and still in pajamas. Claire stirred oatmeal at the stove. Her hair was loose, falling down her back, and her sweater hung off one shoulder the way it did when she forgot to care about how she looked. Ethan walked in quietly, paused, looked. He let the moment imprint itself, every detail, because he knew this was the kind of morning you might live your whole life to get back to once it's gone. Later that day, they planted a second tree. Lena picked it, another maple smaller than the first. Claire suggested they name it. Ellie thought for a moment, then nodded solemnly. "Let's call her Sunday," she said, "because she feels like one." The four of them dug the hole together. Claire pressed the soil around the roots while Ethan poured water gently over it. Lena patted the base and whispered something only the tree could hear. They stood back and looked at it. 2 trees now. One from before, one from after. Both still growing. That evening the town gathered. Not for a ceremony, but for something more sacred. Dinner on the lawn. Blankets, lanterns, roasted chicken and pies and warm cider in paper cups. The kids ran wild under the string lights hung from porch to tree. Someone played banjo. Someone else sang quietly in a voice that cracked with beauty. Claire stood beside Ethan near the porch steps, paper cup in hand. "I've never belonged. Somewhere," she said. "You do now," he said, eyes steady. She looked at him. "Even if I still have days when I doubt it?" He reached for her hand. Especially then. As the sun dipped behind the hills, the girls curled up on a blanket, tired and safe. Claire leaned against Ethan's shoulder. The porch light flickered on behind them, casting a warm glow. "Do you still think about her?" Claire asked softly. Ethan didn't need to ask who. "Every day," he said. Claire nodded. "Me too. About who I used to be. Who I tried to be for someone who didn't want me whole." He looked at her then. "You don't have to try anymore." She closed her eyes. Let herself believe him. When it was just the two of them, still outside, beneath the stars, Claire turned to Ethan and said, "We don't have to promise forever." "No," Ethan said. "We just choose each other. Every day." She smiled. "Even when it's hard?" "Especially then." They stood in silence, hands laced. Behind them, two sleeping girls. A town that had shown up. A home that had risen from ash. Two trees bending slightly in the wind but rooted deep. Ahead of them, nothing certain, and everything possible. The promise tree swayed, not because it was fragile, but because it was alive, and like them, it kept choosing the sun. If this story stayed with you, even just a little, leave a like to let it live a little longer. And if you believe in second chances, in quiet kinds of love, and in the homes we choose, subscribe to stay. More stories like this are waiting for you.